Welcome back to the On the Ball podcast. This is episode 122 of the show, and we are once again here to discuss another round of the NRL Rugby League. Is up and firing as always. Round 6 gone now, so we're actually a fairly significant way through the year. That's about a quarter of the way, and obviously given buys. So yeah, it's just about a quarter of the way there, which is pretty exciting. We're starting to really see which teams are looking the goods, which teams are going to struggle this year. We're also now seeing a lot of the rule changes come into effect. We're also seeing some new interpretations of suspensions, penalties, stuff like that. So there's a lot of talking points today, so we're going to cover as many as we can. We will be doing our normal winners and losers, but we will also be discussing the concussion sub, inconsistencies with the match review panel. We'll also be ranking the 2021 rule changes as of now. And yeah, many more talking points to come throughout the episode. So if you're excited, make sure you listen to the whole thing. And yeah, off we go. All right, winners. We'll start with the Melbourne Storm. I think they had an incredible victory over the Roosters. I tipped them to beat the Roosters, as most did. But it was a bit of a danger game for them. Most games in Melbourne, you wouldn't tip against them really, which is why most people were tipping them. But the Roosters looked like they were ready to really take it to Melbourne, and it was a pretty cagey first half. A lot of drop balls, a lot of errors in the play of the ball, but it was also due to the intensity of the defence. I thought both teams were really trying to hit each other really hard. It wasn't as fast as Origin, but it almost had that vibe to it where it wasn't necessarily the cleanest game because there was just a lot of intensity. Every ball, every run was met with a stern, solid shot from the defence. But the game really changed when Harry Grant came on for the mighty Melbourne Storm. As a Tigers fan, I know just how good he is, but it's scary to think he was off the back of a pretty lacklustre pack last year. So this year it's going to be absolutely ridiculous what he can get up to, especially with blokes like Cam Munster and Pappenhausen to his left and right. I think I'll be honest, I reckon I don't know if they will pick him, but based on talent and ability alone, or the performances this year, I reckon he would rightfully wear the Australian number 9 jersey come the end of the year. I think he will leave the 2021 season as the game's best hooker. In my opinion, he was probably the best hooker last year, bar Cameron Smith. I don't think Damien Cook was that good last year, but I understand that it's his jersey to lose. Basically the world just got to see it yet again. For those who maybe forgot how good he was, it was a nice reminder for people like me who've watched it for weeks after weeks last year. It was kind of a kick in the teeth. Yes, I know we didn't think we were going to keep him after last season, but it did hurt to think that calibre of player was playing in the Tigers' colours at one point. But fair play to him. He seems like a good bloke. He said he loves the Tigers, so definitely got nothing against him there, and I'm glad he's absolutely killing it. Interesting to see what they do in the upcoming rounds. He's come off the bench the last 2 weeks. Will Brandon Smith continue to play a little bit of hooker each match, or will he just go back to his middle forward role and Harry Grant will play the full 80 at hooker? We'll wait and find out that. But they both worked really well together on the Friday night, and huge win for the Storm. They completely outclassed a fairly lacklustre Roosters team. They did suffer a sin bin to Victor Radley, which we will talk about in the losers section, but yeah, huge signs for the Storm. And my preseason prediction of them finishing minor premiership as minor premiers, and I don't think I said they'll make the grand final, but I'd probably not bet against them in terms of that either. But yeah, minor premiership still looking pretty good for the Storm, even though the Panthers are undefeated. Great win by the Storm. Next up, we've got the Newcastle Knights. They had a pretty good win over the Sharkies. They had been in a bit of a bad stretch of form there. A fair few injuries. They lost to the Tigers. They lost to the Titans. People were starting to hop off the Knights train, thought they were completely ruled out of finals, but they bounced back with a nice win over the Sharks. Yes, the Sharks were in a lot of controversy given the John Morris sacking last week, but a lot of people thought that would actually galvanise them and it would give them extra juice to get up for this match. But the Knights were too good on the day. Kalen Ponga just showed why he is held in such high regard. There are a few doubters of Kalen Ponga, and he basically just silenced them all. I think don't know exactly, but from watching, I'm pretty sure he had 2 tries and 2 try assists. He scored the sealer, I believe, and this was all playing with Gastro pretty much. So, incredible performance. Showed how much he means to that team. Arguably that he means more than Mitchell Pearce, but that's a debate for another day. Basically almost back to full strength now, the Knights. I think Chris Randall's injured, but he was, not really in the starting team anyway. But Mitchell Pearce is out, and that's about it, I think. Heimel Hunt's out, but once again, not too much of a difference there. Bradman Best is back, Kurt Mann's back, the Saifidi boys back, Clem is back, Watson's back. So it's been pretty rare in the last 2 years that they've almost been full strength, but this is about as close as they will get minus Mitchell Pearce. So yes, that seems like a big out on paper, but compared to all the other outs they've dealt with over the last 18 months, they're actually in a strong spot right now. And I believe they have the easiest schedule. In pre-season, they were viewed as having the easiest schedule based on 2020 performances. So I know those schedule rankings would change now that teams like the Dragons and stuff are seen as a lot harder task. But yeah, it's looking kind of nice for the Knights. They look like they could well and truly still make finals after a nice win over the Sharkies. Next, I've got Manly. Probably the biggest winners coming out of the weekend. Everyone had written them off. They were being viewed as a bottom feeder like the Cowboys, Bulldogs, and Broncos, but I don't actually know what direction Mudgee is from Manly. I'm going to just say it's west because it's country, but I don't know if it's north or south. Sorry, you can slew me in the comments for my knowledge of New South Wales geography, even though I was born in New South Wales, country New South Wales as well. But they won 36-0. It's genuinely one of the most fascinating things about NRL at the moment, the difference in Manly's performances with or without Tom Trbojevic. You think he just is a good fullback, but he just adds so much more to them. It's not just him alone, though. It's definitely a psychological thing with a lot of other players, I think, which is understandable. It's a huge boost having your best player in the side, but it's just ridiculous how much of a difference there is. But yeah, good for Manly fans to finally see their team have a huge win. Titans disappointing. We'll touch on them in a little bit. But yeah, Manly big winners. And they have the Tigers this week, which they would be viewing as a very winnable game. And they're actually going to start favourites in that, which is something Manly haven't been able to say too many times this year. So interesting signs from the Manly Seagulls. Parramatta Eels also had another good week. There were quite a few teams who had a good week this week. Parramatta convincingly beat the Raiders. I didn't actually manage to catch this game as it was Saturday night. I was out watching the other code of football, but they won 35-10, absolutely stormed over the Raiders in their home territory. Ricky Stewart went on a bit of a tear in post-match, saying some of these players don't want to wear the jersey. But enough talk about the Raiders. The Eels, absolutely sensational. I've mentioned that they are a bit of a flat track bully. They beat the teams below them convincingly, and they struggle against the teams above them. But now they've racked up wins against the Storm and the Raiders in Canberra. So 2 very impressive wins. And all of a sudden, I'm not going to hype up Parramatta fans and then, uppercut them. But, I still think they're a fair way away from the likes of Penrith, Storm, and Rabbitohs maybe not the Rabbitohs, but Penrith and the Storm in terms of premiership favourites. If I had to open up a bookmaking business myself and set odds, I would have them a fair way off those 2 teams. But yeah, wins against the Raiders in Canberra and the Storm, maybe that gap should start to close, in my opinion, anyway. Very impressive from the Parramatta Eels away from home. And then finally, I'm going to touch on my Tigers. Yes, they didn't win, but I'm sorry. I think they're not getting enough credit this week. Yes, they had an absolutely shocking performance last weekend in Tommy Raudonikis' memorial match, I guess, where they got pounded by the Cowboys. But to come back, be within a bee's dick of beating the Rabbitohs, pretty much couldn't have gone closer to winning, really. Never really seen that before, where a game came down to if it goes one way, they win. If it goes the other way, they win. I guess that's probably happened with a try on the last play, but you know what I mean. A try going either way. I've never seen that before. The 2-point field goal was brought under the microscope. Adam Reynolds obviously slotted one from about 45 on an angle. First time Nathan Cleary did it, yes, against the Broncos, but this is really the first time it's kind of been done and it's changed the result of the game as such. The Panthers one was kind of just to put them ahead. But yeah, I thought the Tigers fought very valiantly. I'd say people would have the Rabbitohs as third favourite right now in the premiership race behind the Storm and Panthers. So for the Tigers to be within a bee's dick of beating a team at that level, I think it's pretty impressive after losing to the Cowboys. So I'm pretty proud as a Tigers fan. I watched the replay when I got home from the footy. Managed to escape the score. Yes, it was pretty shattering and it was a little bit disappointing, and some of the antics of stuff like Latrell Mitchell was very frustrating and disappointing at the same time. I was pretty proud of the boys. I think there were a lot of impressive performances from our players. So I'm happy for the Tigers. Hopefully they can start getting some wins on the board though, because it is a results-driven industry. So well done to the Tigers, but hopefully some wins in the near future. All right, losers. We'll start with the Dragons. Now, this is probably stiff because they have had such a great start to the year, but I mean it in the sense that they've come back to the pack. People were starting to maybe think they're as good as that top 6, top 4, whatever you want to call it, teams, but this loss to the Warriors at home on Sunday Arvo just showed they are still a mid-table team, and I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but they are still at the same level as, the Titans, the Warriors themselves, other teams of that ilk. So, yes, it's been a great start to the year, but I think Dragons fans and NRL fans need to not get ahead of themselves with the Dragons. They are still a team that's come off 2-3 really poor years. So, good win from the Warriors, but a little bit of a full crash back down to earth, if you know what I mean, for the Dragons. So, great start to the year, but they need to just remember they're not a top 6, top 4 type team, and they're going to be pushing for 8th spot at the very best. But well done to their start. It was a pretty good match actually, so well done to the Warriors as well. Next, lose to the Raiders. Mentioned the Eels and the winners. Raiders, probably the most disappointing performance of the week, you have to say. They went in as favourites. I think me and my whole family tipped them, but they came out as very disappointing losers, and them and the Roosters now are starting to distance themselves in a bad way from that top 4. The Eels, Panthers, Storm and Rabbitohs look like they're forming a bit of a breakaway, and the Raiders and Roosters look almost closer to the likes of the Titans than those top 4. Yes, the Raiders and the Roosters are pretty well-known slow starters. We saw it last year with both. Well, the Roosters didn't really get hot for finals, but the Raiders got hot for finals, so they could well and truly do that again. I'm not saying they're not going to make finals or anything like that, but pretty disappointing for the Eels to come into their home building and beat them by 25 points. That's a flogging. There's no other way of putting it. And the week before they got fairly comfortably beaten by Penrith as well. So that's disappointing from the Raiders. They're starting to look like a bit of an Eels team so far this year, where they just beat the teams they're expected to and struggle against the top 5, top 6 teams. So they need to sort that out, as they've got probably the deepest squad in the competition, you'd have to say, with Tom Starling being the backup hooker, Harawira Naira and Corey Horsburgh playing reserve grade. I don't think many other teams can boast that kind of depth, but it doesn't matter if you have depth if the 17 you pick on the day aren't putting up performances that is good enough, really. So they need to really lift their act. And then the Titans is my final loser in terms of teams specifically. On the end of that Manly absolute clinic, but that's not good enough from the Titans. They want to be a top 8 team this year. If you're going to be a top 8 team, you can't lose a game 36-0 against a team who have only had, I think, 1 win for the season. So, yeah, that's not good enough for the Titans. Holbrook talked about it in the press conference, saying his team maybe got a little bit ahead of themselves, started to count their chickens before they hatched. Yeah, that's right. Is it eggs before they... No, chickens before they hatch, because they hatch from the eggs. That's right. But yeah, that's a good thing that he said that. It shows that they're not completely out of touch. They know what's gone wrong, so that's a good thing. But yeah, this inconsistency from the Titans is getting a little bit worrying. They got pumped by the Raiders, then they pump a team, and then they lose to their Seagulls. So they need to sort that out if they want to be a top 8 team. They need to get a little bit more consistent, otherwise teams like the Dragons and Sharks might steal their spots. But moving on to the main talking points of round 6, the biggest two are probably the concussion sub and suspensions. I'll start with the concussion subs. I don't have any specific examples here, but there's just a blatant exploitation of the concussion sub going on right now. Two aspects. A, there's a lot of players going off for a concussion sub, and I say that with quotation marks. They're not imitation marks, but they're not bloody concussion subs, are they? I think it was the Bulldogs. I think I know what the Bulldogs trainer looks like, and he's in my head. I think they went off with an injury. They were holding their hand, and they went off as a concussion sub. His head had nothing to do with anything. But that's just not picking out the Bulldogs. Every team's been doing that, so I don't know how you can stop that, but I guess if every team's doing it, it's not that bad. It's a fair playing field, but it does, why have that rule if people are just going to blatantly break it? And then the second part is that players, whatever the concussion test that the trainers do is clearly not good enough. The amount of times you see a player get KO'd, and then they stand up, pass the test, and then a set later they get called off by the independent doctor. And yes, that's better than them playing the rest of the 80 minutes, but still, it's not a great look when, a Lachlan Lewis, he gets KO'd, stumbles to his feet, and then plays another set. It's like everyone in the crowd knows, all the commentators know, all the coaches know, everyone who's seen that footage knows that he needs to be concussion tested in the room. So something's got to be fixed there, because that's not a good look. There's also talks that I don't know if anything eventuated from it, but people were saying Cleary was dazed in the match against the Broncos, didn't get concussion tested, so they've got to remain vigilant in assessing those sort of situations, making sure rules aren't being broken for the best players in crucial moments and stuff like that, because at the end of the day, it is head injuries. I listened to the Bloke in a Bar podcast, and I can't lie, I didn't rate their take on it. Fitchy was basically saying that Harry Grant, I think he was supposedly knocked out. I can't remember it exactly, but they were saying, how could he have played so well if he was concussed? I'm sorry, that's just probably the worst logic I've ever heard. For example, my mate got concussed, didn't feel the effects for a week later, so has absolutely no bearing on the next hour, 2 hours, whatever. So that's probably the worst take ever. So I didn't completely agree with it. Kempy had something interesting to say, saying that he would trade off a little bit of long-term health to stay out there on that field, and that's not necessarily something that has to do with this rule. That has more, they would change the rules if they're going to take that approach, not necessarily. You can't just pick and choose when to do it, but that's an interesting point. I guess maybe they should ask the players if everyone holds that view. But yeah, it's not a great look when someone's getting knocked out and standing up and going again. And then the suspended players and the inconsistencies with the match review panel and referees is a very interesting topic at the moment. The judiciary is actually going on as I am speaking, and I don't think there's been any updates. Paul Momirovski has accepted 3 weeks, I know that much, and I believe the Victor Radley case is in front of the judge right now. But the 4 ones I'll look at is Paul Momirovski, 3 weeks, Latrell Mitchell, 4 weeks, Victor Radley, 3 weeks, and Jack Hetherington, 3 weeks, but he got 5 because of his track record. But we'll just look at it as 3, 4, 3, and 3. So Paul Momirovski's high tackle, I think, was on Tom Did, and I was pretty outraged by it when I first saw it. I couldn't believe it wasn't a penalty. I couldn't believe it wasn't a sin bin or send-off, but no penalty there. I think that's the downfall of having one ref. Very hard for one ref to see everything that goes on. Still don't really understand why 2 refs got taken away, but anyway. So that was pretty bad that wasn't even a penalty, and he's going to get 3 weeks. Tom Dearden, I don't think, got concussed or anything, so that's a good thing, but pretty bad that didn't get pulled up. When I first saw it, I thought sin bin for sure. But people were saying send off. Shout out to, I think it was Braithen Astor in commentary. He was pretty outraged by it, and I appreciate it when commentators pick out stuff like that. Next, we'll go with Victor Radley. Similar shot. I don't think it had as much impact as Momirovski's, but it was a bit looser, you'd have to say, on Cameron Munster. Got him sin binned, which I agree with sin bin for a high tackle like that, but I don't know if I think he should get 3 weeks. I think you should maybe get 2. I think you should maybe get 1 less than Momirovski, because Momirovski was on a player who was kicking, so he couldn't protect himself, and it had a little bit more force, where Radley's was more off balance, and it was more just like hand. Yes, it was a bad challenge, deserved a sin bin, but I'm not sure if he deserves 3 weeks for it. So when you're just comparing those two, I thought Momorowski's was worse, and then Hetherington's, I think 3 weeks is fair, similar to the Momorowski one, but he got sent off. And look, I think that is an issue that sadly some of these, not lesser known, everyone knows who Jack Hetherington is now, but some of these lower quality players who have reputations, they seem to get picked on a lot, or just the less important players, where someone like a Latrell Mitchell, yes, Latrell Mitchell gets picked on 100% by the media, but in terms of the referees, they're probably less likely to sim in someone like him, because that's going to have a bigger impact on the game. So yeah, I thought Jack Hetherington could send off. I know that tackle historically is a send-off, but I'll be honest, I think a send-off for a high shot, unless it's like really, really bad, is pretty stiff. And I'm normally on the progressive side of things, but I think Momorowski, Radley and Hetherington all should have probably copped the same in-game decision or penalty, which I believe should have been a sim, and I think they all should have got sim-binned. And then Radley one less week from suspension. So that's my take on it. Let me know yours in the comments below. But yeah, Latrell Mitchell, oh, look, I don't even know what's going on there. How he's been fined for trying to kick Luke Garner in the head with his studs it's disgusting. Like, I'm not even competent. I don't remember exactly how much time he got, but John Hopperwaiter kicked Keith Galloway in the head, and he got like months. And just because Latrell's one of the game's biggest players, he only got fined. People like Brad Fittler spoke out and said he shouldn't have even got fined because he hardly touched him. To me, I don't agree with that policy. He had the intent to try and kick him in the head, and I think, yeah, it's tough because there's a lot of times people have intent, you don't actually see they're trying to do it. But he was blatantly trying to kick him in the head with his studs. In my opinion, it should have been like a 2 or 3 week suspension. Same goes for when Luai kicked Nicarima in the back of the head last year. I think they should actually borderline be more punished than high tackles because they're actually not a part of the game. Yes, they may have less impact, but they're not needed. Where the high tackles, at least they're trying to tackle the person. And then his forearm for David Nofaluma, I agree with that getting 4 weeks. I think that's a good call from the match review panel. The fact it wasn't a penalty or that we got nothing from it in the game is pretty shit. And then his knee slide. I actually don't. I'm a bit of a Hawkeye when it comes to the knee slides on try attempts, but I didn't think his was as bad because it was towards the leg area, but it was a dog act, so I'll cop the fine for that. But yeah, in my opinion, he should have been facing up to 7 to 8 weeks. I reckon maybe 4 for each, in my humble opinion, because the reason I reckon they should get more than the high tackles is neither of them had anything to do with the ball or the game. He was saying the Nofaluma one was a contested footy. He took 2 extra steps, extended his arm out, and hit him in the head. But yeah, more to the point with this one, the one that disappointed me was the fact that the Tigers got no compensation in the game. And that's generally an issue when it comes to this suspension stuff. Now, the following 4 teams that get to play the Rabbitohs get benefited, yet we're the ones that should have been benefited. So that's really annoying, and I think if they have the ability to see those shots on technology, he should get sent off. I think he should have got sent off for the Nofaluma one personally, because that's just a really bad challenge. In soccer, you actually get sent off for any contact to the head with forearm or elbow. So I know it's a different sport and everyone's going to say, oh, well, soccer's soft and stuff like that, but that just shows the kind of extent that elbow to head injuries and forearm to head injuries are taken in other sports. So yeah, in my opinion, that should have been sent off and he should have copped about 8 weeks. But yeah, that's nothing to do with him as a person. I know a lot of the media outlets will now attack him for being a grub and stuff like that. He is a bit of a grub. He gets white line fever. Great bloke off the field, but yeah, that's really disappointing. The fact that the Tigers didn't get compensated in any way for it, and the fact that he didn't get charged for the Luke Garner hit. It has actually just come in, as I'm recording it, that Radley's has gotten off his suspension. It's gone from 3 weeks to a fine. And yeah, that's pretty extreme. I just said he should get 2 weeks, but I'll be honest, I'm not even against it. Looking at the footage again, I think it's deserving of a sin bin, and yeah, I just don't think it had that much force behind it. It was a lazy, dangerous challenge, but yeah, I just don't think it had that much force behind it because it was kind of just his wrist. But yeah, I'm actually okay with that, to be honest. But yeah, once again shows the inconsistency that it's just weird that he was facing 3 weeks and gets off completely. That's bizarre. But anyway, the Mitchell one is now in the judiciary. All right, moving on to my predicted top 8. Let me know in the comments, by the way, what you think about those suspensions. Moving on to the predicted top 8. I'm actually going to make no changes to last week's 8. Actually, I'm making one change. I'm lifting the Penrith Panthers from 3rd to 2nd. I just think Latrell Mitchell missing for a month. I think the Panthers have an easier schedule as well. They're already undefeated. I just don't see them finishing outside the top 2. Whereas the Rabbitohs might be a little bit more inconsistent. So I'm putting the Rabbitohs 3rd, Panthers 2nd. I've still got Storm on top, Eels in 4th, Raiders 5th, Roosters 6th. I've still got the Titans 7th, which I'm unsure about, but I'm keeping them there because I think they're better than the teams below them. And I'm keeping the Dragons at 8, but I'll shout out the teams who are breathing down their necks. The Knights, who probably were a long way off my 8 last week, but I think they've showed that without Mitchell Pearce, they can still be a good team. They're right there. The Warriors are right there after a good win over the Dragons, and soon they get to go back home, which, I'll be honest, historically they've not made it a great home advantage, but I reckon the way the Warriors run now, they're a lot more structured, they're a lot more logical, rational. I think they can turn that into a fortress. And then the Sharks as well. Tigers, Seagulls a little bit further off, but I'm not writing them out of finals yet either. I'm writing the Bulldogs, Broncos and Cowboys off, sorry, but I just don't think you have it in you this year. Alright, this week for my list segment, I'm going to be ranking the 2021 rule changes. I'll be honest, some of them are very irrelevant. I didn't even know they were a thing, but yeah, I'll give them a rating out of 10 actually. I won't rank them, but rating out of 10 as to whether I like it or not. And I'll let you know whether I'd keep it or change it. Alright, number 1, injured players having to leave the field if they've stopped the play. I swear this hasn't happened since round 1. I actually like the rule. It's probably a little bit harsh, but I do like it because it does it's obvious what it got brought in. It tries to stop people going down, wasting time and laying their defence to set up, and it does exactly that. I think it should be policed more heavily, and yeah, I just think they've gone a little bit soft on it last week. But in terms of the rule itself, I'll give it a 9 out of 10, but because they're not policing it, it can't be that high out of 10, but I'll keep it a 9 out of 10. They need to police it heavier. Next, referee try or no try to the bunker. I think this is something that hasn't been talked about enough. I think this has been a great inclusion to the game. They've been so fast with their bunker calls. A lot of them we don't even see them looking at them. And you think back to even as late as last year, we were waiting around 3-4 minutes for a bunker call. And now, yeah, calls like the West Tigers and Rabbitohs one took a bit longer, but that's understandable. It's a huge call and it's pretty hard to see, really. So I think that's probably a 10 out of 10. I think it's been awesome. The only bad thing is you kind of celebrate when you think you've scored, and it might not be a try, but that's the same as VAR and soccer, and I think people just need to cop that. It happens in cricket as well. Break. They say break when there's a scrum, which I did not know. You're not allowed to leave the scrum till they say break. I guess it's a good rule, stops people leaving the scrum too early. I'll just give it a 5 out of 10. Completely average, haven't even noticed it. The captain's challenge, if you get an inconclusive decision, sticks with the umpire's call, you retain your challenge. Look, once again, it has not much impact on the game, but it's a good rule, so I'll give it a 10 out of 10. Why not? The big one, why I've done this segment today, the 2-point field goal. It's probably split rugby league crowds down the fence. I am a little bit concerned that now in the last 2 rounds we've seen how effective the 2-point field goal can be. The more teams will go for it more often, and we could get to the stage where it's a bit of a rugby union situation and teams can just win without scoring tries. I've actually long been a big advocate of kicking for field goal. I've never understood why teams don't just shoot every single time just before half time. I think it's an absolute easy chance to get a 1 point, and I've always thought if the defence is very strong, you're not feeling your 5th play option why you don't just bang over a field goal. Yes, 40 metres is a long way out. Yes, there's not many kickers who can do it. Yes, you're very skillful if you can do it, but I am a little bit worried that teams will start to do it too many times, because 3 of these is the exact same as a converted try, which is pretty insane to think. When there's people like Adam Reynolds who can probably do it at 70-80%. So that's a little bit concerning, but overall, I think it's been a cool rule. Yeah, I like it, really. It's a similar kind of vibe to the 40-20, which I think is a great rule. And yeah, I'll have to say, I feel like teams who are getting dominated should do it more, to be honest. Like a Bulldogs or something, you're only getting to the halfway line for your 5th tackle play. Why not have a pop? But yeah, I guess it's a big risk if you give them 7 tackles, but I'm going to give it a 8 out of 10. I wouldn't change it. I'm interested to see how it goes for the rest of the year, however. Handover for incorrect play the ball, once again, didn't even know that was a thing. Haven't seen it happen yet. We'll give it a 5 out of 10. 6 again for offside. It's arguably made the game too fast, but I'm not going to complain. I'll give it a 7 out of 10. I'd probably keep it, but it's not that effective. And then play the ball for touch kick. I actually don't rate this rule. I think it should be changed. I understand why it is. It's to stop teams like the Melbourne Storm and the Roosters, who are up with 20 minutes to go, to just kick for touch every time, so their defence is always set up. But they didn't really think about the flip side. When a team is getting beaten down, you can kick from your own 40 line into the corner. I know that's a 40-20, but you know what I mean. Say you're past the 40 metre line, you kick for the corner, get a scrum, you can reset, and then you're back to a 50-50 ball game rather than always being dominated. So I don't think they thought about that, so I'll give it a 3 out of 10. I would like it to be changed. I don't think it's a very good rule. And yes, because we've seen it recently, they still take their time to do the play the ball because everyone wants a rest, so why not just bring back the scrum? Ultimately, because of that, it hasn't had too much impact, but if they start doing quick play the balls, then the team who's kicking for touch is kind of dogs, so yeah. And that moves us on to our game picks for the week. Once again, not doing the players of the week or rookie of the week because it's just not that interesting, is it? I'm actually very excited for some of the list segments coming up. I did some brainstorming before. I'm going to be doing commentators' rankings, coaches' rankings, NRL top 100, like they do with the NFL top 100. I'll rank my top 100 NRL players, and I'm also going to start doing drafts. So if there was a draft in 2018, which player would have gone to where and such. So that's going to be an interesting concept. But onto the game picks. Now, sure bet of the week this week was actually really hard. I don't think there's many sure bets. In terms of, I think there's a lot of games I could say there's a 70-80% chance the team will win, but there's not many where I'm like 95 plus, you know. So I'm going with the Storm to beat the Warriors, which is an interesting one because the Warriors are a good team. Everyone always underrates them. They like to be the underdog and beat the favourite. But Anzac Day clash in Melbourne, Pappenhausen's out. So interesting that I've gone for them, but Harry Grant is playing insane right now. Yes, it's only been for 1 or 2 games, but still. The Warriors are almost at full strength, barring like Chanel Harris-Tavita and Adam Fanua-Blake, so not really full strength, but Melbourne in Melbourne, I just think they'll be too good for them. Even if it's not a thumping, if I had to put money on a team, I'd probably put them on them. I think the biggest favourites in terms of the bookmakers are actually Penrith. Penrith and the Storm are both $1.12, so it's not outrageous from me. But a lot of the other good teams are playing mid-table sides, so they could lose. But this game has happened since 2009. The Storm have only lost twice, so I'm liking them to beat the Warriors this week. Upset of the week, I'm actually getting around my team here. Usually very cynical on the Tigers and pessimistic, so it's weird for me to be saying this, but I don't think, similar to what I was saying before, I don't think many of the upsets are that likely. They're a chance, like I'd say they're a 20 to 30% chance, but the one that I think is the most likeliest, is that a word? The most likely is the West Tigers to beat Manly. Manly are huge favourites, which I get after last week's clinic, but Tigers also played pretty bloody well against a better team than the Titans. But the Seagulls are $1.54, Tigers are $2.50. At Bankwest, I have to say, I don't know the actual stats, but I feel like Tigers don't play well at Bankwest, even though it's supposedly one of our home grounds. But the Tigers are due for a win. I think they played well last week. Yes, they played bad the week before, but they haven't won since the Knights game. They've only had 1 win all year. And yes, the Tigers haven't been a great team in the last decade or so, but one thing they rarely do is come last, bottom, second last, third last. We usually in and around 12th, 11th, 10th. So I think we'll be similar this year, and we will get a fair amount of wins. So I think we're due for a win. And why not against a Manly team who, up until last week, have been struggling. We played great against the Brabbados, as I mentioned before. We generally are weak against weaker teams, which is a weird concept. But yeah, I just think we might catch Manly a little bit off guard. They might be a little bit cocky coming out of last week's thumping. The Tigers will be raring to go after not getting the points against the Rabbitohs. The Manly still have a half-back at hooker, and in my opinion, their forward pack's not great, even compared to ours. I think the matchup will be determined in the halves. I think both of them can play well on their day, can play poorly off their day, so I think that'll probably decide it. But for me, I just think the Tigers are a good chance. I'm not sure if I'm tipping the Tigers, but I think they're a good chance to beat Manly this Sunday on Anzac Day. Now looking at the game spreads I like the Rabbitohs. Once again, I never know the terminology for this. I need to work it out, but I'm going to just say maths as always. Rabbitohs minus 6.5 against the Titans. They're $1.45, so they're a strong favourite. So for them to win by just over a try, I think is fairly likely. Yes, they are without Latrell Mitchell, which I think will be a huge loss. Titans will be looking for a bounce-back win. It's at home as well. And the Rabbitohs probably are due for a loss. So there's a few things stacked up against the Rabbitohs, but if they're going to win, they're probably going to win by more than 7 points, basically. Next, I've got the Bulldogs. Interesting one at plus 16.5 up against the Sharks at Jubilee State, Net Strata Jubilee. The Sharks are $1.15, which is very short odds for a team that just lost to the Knights, but Bulldogs haven't won yet. I don't believe they haven't. They've only scored points in 2 weeks, I think. So sounds weird that I'm getting around them, but I reckon they'll be competitive this week. I think the Sharks is a team they might not beat, but they can wrestle with them for a long time. I think they could have easily won that game on Sunday, but Hetherington getting sent off ultimately started their downfall. Yes, they kind of played better after he got sent off, but I think they might have won if he stayed on the park. So for them to have a plus 16.5 buffer, I think they could get up there with the spread against the Sharkies. Raiders at minus 9.5 against the Cowboys. It's in Townsville. Raiders are in bad form, once again stacked up against me there, but I think the Raiders will bounce back. I don't know, I haven't actually seen their team this week, so I don't know what changes they've made, but I'm expecting them to bounce back, and I don't actually think the Cowboys have been that good in the last 2 weeks. I think they've just come up against the Tigers were crap and the Bulldogs had 12 players, so I think they might get a bit of a reality check this week against the Raiders and lose by more than 10 points. Tigers at plus 5.5, already mentioned my reasons there, and then the Roosters at minus 4. I just think whenever you tip a team and the spread is less than a try, I think I always like those situations really, because there's only a limited amount of games that the margin is less than a try, so yeah, Roosters at minus 4 in the Anzac Day clash against the Dragons. I like that. So that is it for episode 122 of the podcast. Might be doing an NRL fantasy episode this week. Let me know if you're keen for that. I'm maybe interested in doing, a bit more fantasy content on here, because I can't lie. Off the podcast, I'm doing NRL fantasy and AFL Supercoach 90% of my time. So may as well make content about it because I'm passionate about it. But subscribe and tune into the On The Ball social medias if you are keen for that and want to see it. But until then, it's been fun, it's been enjoyable, it's been interesting talking about the biggest issues in the game right now. Let me know your opinions down below, and I guess I'll see you next week for the NRL if you're not joining us for the AFL content. And yeah, enjoy the footy on the weekend. Cheers.